Welcome to the 707, a weekly half-hour program produced by KRCB, a service of NorCal Public Media. The 707 features voices and stories from your community, stories about our recent cultural history, and stories that show how we are connected to each other. I'm your host, Michelle Marques. Join me in the mosh pit as we explore Sonoma County's punk rock history with my friend, Gabe Meline.
Do you have any pictures that you could send to me from the exhibit?
Of me when I was a stupid 13-year-old?
Yes,
I do. Yeah, I do.
Meline is the guest curator of the new exhibit at the Museum of Sonoma County. It's called Disturbing the Peace, Sonoma County's Early Punk Underground, and it's opening on April 17th. He's also the senior editor at KQED's Arts and Culture Desk. I called him to chat about the exhibit and asked how he got involved.
They called me. This was not my idea, and I was a little bit surprised that a museum would want to do a exhibit on punk, and also they said that they'd talked to a couple of other people, and that they said, "Oh, you got to call Gabe Meline." And I was like, it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it'll be worth it. I had seen the museum, I think last year or the year before, they did an exhibit on lowriders. And I think that was a really good example of what can be done with a museum when you're talking about subcultures that had a ripple effect and also like recent history. This exhibit is going to be in the history part of the museum in the old post office. And it's not like the pioneers crossing the plains or anything. It's a very recent, and a lot of these people are still alive. But I think that's an important type of history to tell.
Yeah. And I mean, neither of us are getting any younger.
Right.
But it is strange to think about some of these things that we think of, as Gen Xers or that sort of thing, of this being a historical kind of thing that is worthy of being in a museum, but it is.
Yeah, I think the worthiness question is worth asking. Punk is so diametrically opposed to itself. It's incredibly intelligent and also sometimes very stupid. It is striving for relevance, and also a lot of the times it's completely pointless. Like it's just such an interesting subculture to me in that regard. There's always somebody in punk who has a opposite in the same scene, sometimes in the same room, or sometimes in the same band. And resolving that tension, I think, is the ongoing experiment of punk.
So tell me about your experience in punk music.
I'll be brief because I don't really want this exhibit. I'm trying not to put myself in the exhibit too much, but I grew up in Larkfield, and very removed. Downtown Santa Rosa was the big city to me. And I just started hearing this music and seeing these people dressing in a certain way. And it was immediately fascinating to me as a somewhat sheltered kid growing up in the sticks. Um, as soon as I possibly could, I was like sneaking out, going to shows, hitching rides, and I just wanted to be a part of it in any possible way. And I kind of eventually was. I played in multiple bands, and I had a zine, and I booked shows, booked tours, I put out records. Like I just about every little role that you can have in a punk scene, I dipped my foot into at one point or another.
And in terms of Sonoma County's punk scene, do you know roughly when it started?
Well, there's a part of this exhibit that's kind of like the roots of the punk scene around here. In the 70s, I did a lot of like stories about this when I was at the Bohemian, but in the 70s, disco really took over, and a lot of live music venues stopped booking rock bands and just had DJs in a disco ball. But there were a handful of bands that kind of kept the like oddball, strange, artsy spirit of the 60s alive. And some of those bands like $27 Snap-on Face or the Imposters, like kind of these progressive new wave, not exactly punk, but like you can see it starting to coalesce. And then in the early 80s, there were some hardcore bands around here, Soldiers of Fortune among them. In the mid 80s, we finally got our first like full-length punk album by a Sonoma County band, which was Victim's Family. And that album, incidentally, Victim's Family is going to play that album in its entirety after the exhibit opening on April 17th. So you can the short answer is you can't pinpoint an exact date of it. It kind of is a progression, and it still is a progression, you know. I hope the exhibit shows this. In the 80s, hardcore just ruled. It was just as loud as possible, as fast as possible. Sonoma County had its own strange spin on hardcore punk. Like we infused jazz into it with Victim's Family, or we infused country music into it with bands like Coffee and Donuts or Nuisance. There was a lot of metal crossover up here, and of course, in the late 80s, a lot of funk crossover. So it it almost benefited us that we didn't know what we were doing, or we didn't know that there was a sort of rule book to follow. And being a smaller scene than San Francisco or the East Bay, a lot of people with a lot of different musical backgrounds were sort of forced to start bands with each other, or, different bands booked on the same bill. And I think that inspired this really interesting cross-pollination, which to me is the sound of Sonoma County punk.
But then with punk, you're breaking rules anyway. So,
Yeah.
right. So you can bring other genres and stuff into it, right?
Yeah, I think down in San Francisco at the time there was a lot more dogmatic rigidity about the sound of punk, and that sprung up again in the 90s when Green Day started getting very popular. Nirvana had broken, and these punk institutions like Maximum Rock and Roll and Gilman Street in Berkeley sort of battened down the hatches and said, okay, no, we're only booking real punk, as defined by us. And I can understand why that was necessary, but it is also a little bit silly. But yeah, I don't know what in punk isn't silly.
Right, right. So, what kinds of topics do punk musicians write about?
um, Everything under the sun. I mean, the yes, everything under the sun, because no matter what you have to say, no matter what topic you want to address, being in a punk band allows you to address it however you want to. Like freedom of speech is really paramount in the punk scene. There are very stupid bands, there are very smart bands, there are very personal bands, and there are very political bands. And um, some of the issues, the topics that get addressed in this exhibit, at least, are Nazi skinheads were a giant problem in the punk scene, even up here in Sonoma County. There was one night where they convened at the Phoenix Theater in 1990, ready to crack skulls and invade the show and cause problems. And a lot of the punks, some of them pacifists, like got wind of this beforehand, and they had a meeting down the street and came up with a plan to fight back and drive them out of town. This had happened previously in Berkeley, but because the Berkeley punks knew how to manage this, they actually came up and counseled the Petaluma punks on how to eradicate Nazi skinheads from the scene. I think running Nazis out of a scene or a country is very important to do, and pretty relevant right now. A lot of things that punk addressed are still relevant, like when the George Floyd protest started happening and people were filming police misconduct, police brutality on their phones. I thought to myself, well, this reminds me a lot of Cop Watch in the 90s when people with giant camcorders, would have to go around filming the police, as is their right, to document police activity. When Me Too bubbled up in 2017, I recognized that from so many Riot Girl zines and Riot Girl bands and scene politics within the punk scene about abuse of women and sexual assault and calling men out for it. Universal basic income is a thing in cities now. Mutual aid is a thing, and that just reminds me a lot of Food Not Bombs. Like many a Sunday afternoon at the punk house I lived at, people would be cooking giant pots of food in the kitchen to take down to Railroad Square and Courthouse Square and just give food out for free. And so these things, Cop Watch, Riot Girl, Food Not Bombs, they were very like intertwined with the punk scene at the time. And it was almost like we didn't go to church, but we still gave back in some way.
In the next segment of the 707, we'll hear about local punk rockers and where they are now, as well as what you'll see at this exhibit. This is KRCB.
KRCB is Sonoma County's NPR station, featuring the voices, sounds, and culture that make our home unique. From the heartwarming tales of postcards,
my grandmother was the founder of Juneteenth in Sonoma County,
to the Arts Briefs series shining a spotlight on the incredible youth in the arts scene.
Mariachi can express everything that you feel.
And farm tales.
We live in this beautiful area that allows all forms of success in agriculture.
Your stories, your station. KRCB 104.9, Sonoma County's NPR station.
Welcome back to the 707 on KRCB. I'm your host, Michelle Marques. This music is by Sonoma County's longest-running punk band, Victim's Family, a track titled George Benson. The band will perform a concert just around the corner from the Museum of Sonoma County on the opening night of the new exhibit called Disturbing the Peace, Sonoma County's Early Punk Underground. I'm talking with Gabe Meline, the guest curator of the show.
There's also quite a bit of art that is attached to punk, physical art. So tell me a little bit about zines and other artistic forms.
Yeah, zines, flyers, and probably like demo tapes are the three main outlets for that I can think of. All of this sprung from just a need and a lack of resources. Like nobody really knew how to get a professional flyer printed. Certainly people didn't know how to make a professional magazine or make a professional cassette. But Kinko's existed, and if you were lucky, you got a bootleg Kinko's counter to make copies for free. And you could make your own magazine, and you could make your own tapes and your own flyers. And it forced some people who might not have ever considered it to be artistically inclined, or think about design or graphics, or use rub-on letters or whiteout or typewriters. Some of those people have gone on to pretty good careers. There's a flyer artist in Sonoma County. I always liked his flyers. His name's Reuben Hickman. And it turns out he moved to LA and worked for DreamWorks for many years. He worked on the first two Shrek movies. He was the lead animator on the Bob's Burgers movie a couple years ago. He's made a career out of it, which is exciting. There is a punk aesthetic as far as visual art goes, which is very cut and paste, very sloppy, very kind of taking everything in the world and just throwing it up back at you. But then there's some very incredible refined artists too. There was the singer for this band, Abnormal Growth. His name was Clay Butler, and he died a couple years ago. But his art is just so genius to me. It's so remarkable. It's kind of, I don't even really like horror art or that kind of thing. But it's so well done, and very, very fine point pens, and he made comics too, and they were so funny, and his band was funny, and he was just a remarkable person.
What about punk growing up? Is punk still a vibrant scene in Sonoma County? And what about the punkers like yourself? Are you still making crazy punk ass music?
Some people are. I'm not, and I prefer it that way. I'm so glad. I think that punk kind of never grows up. The scene around here is as strong as it ever was. And there's still shows in houses, in backyards, in taquerias, in, parties, warehouses, wherever. Like, kids will always find a way. And as long as electric guitars exist and adolescence exists, there will always be punk rock. And I am completely inspired by the scene as it is now. I hope this exhibit is for them, is to inspire young people. I don't want it to be a dusty, self-congratulatory, like, hey, wow, weren't we so great kind of exhibit. We already got that from the 60s for many, many years. And if I never hear about the 60s ever again, I'm good, Um, so yeah, that's something I'm cognizant of. I just really don't want to become what I hate.
Not the message of punk. Let's not become what we hate.
Please don't become what you hate. But there are, punk growing up. I mean, I guess I mentioned Reuben Hickman, that illustrator. There are other people in the scene around here who found a thing that they could do well. Like Kat Serdowski was this woman who owned a record store across from Santa Rosa High School called Rebel Records. She started managing bands, and then she started managing songwriters, and then she was in LA for many years working with like Christina Aguilera and Pink. And because she learned how to be a manager of a store, and she booked Black Flag at the River Theater, like she, was just kind of good behind the scenes and turned that into a career. Some musicians are still playing music. I think of Adam Carson, the drummer for AFI, who moved back to Petaluma recently. And the Phoenix Theater was really a springboard for that band. They even wrote songs about it. And they still tour the world. And he turned his talent into a career also. It's like punk university. Like you learn a lot in the trenches of a punk scene, and you also learn a lot about yourself and where you fit into the world at large.
All right, so it's opening on the 17th of April?
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's the show after the opening reception.
There's the show's down the street at Barrel Proof Lounge. And yeah, there's a lot of my room here is less cluttered than it used to be because I've been schlepping stuff over to the museum. But yeah, we've got a lot of like t-shirts and zines and flyers and photos and video. There's this video of Green Day playing at Santa Rosa High School that I booked that show. I've never really done anything with the video of it other than I made a copy for them. So that's going to be on a loop at the museum. And you can't watch it on YouTube. You have to go to the museum to see it. And then hopefully learn all about this other soil from which bands like Green Day and Primus and Operation Ivy and all these bands sprung from.
As I wrapped up my call with Meline, he suggested another tune with a great bass line by Rohnert Park's Capitalist Casualties called Violence Junkie. Here's a clip. Eric Stanley, Deputy Director and Curator of History at the Museum of Sonoma County, says Meline was the perfect person to curate this show due to the vast amount of memorabilia he had collected over the years, including very unique pieces.
There'll be kind of some iconic objects, lots of the original kind of posters and zines, a lot of digitized music that you can listen to that are kind of rare, even some, kind of archived off recordings that we can see, some video, some kind of really cool objects. Just the other day brought in the trash can that Gabe brought in. That was from the Phoenix Theater that, doubled as the entry desk for the concerts, but is also kind of a work of art in and of itself, and couldn't think of a better kind of more iconic object covered with stuff, and is just kind of an amazing thing. Instruments, we're going to have like, with the whole, you don't really need to know how to play an instrument super well to get started here. and this, we got a stage that you can jump up on and play, and so there'll be instruments and music and incredible kind of archive photographs. I think things that probably people haven't seen a lot before. I think it's going to be a really amazing exhibition.
Disturbing the Peace, Sonoma County's early punk underground, runs from April 17th through August 23rd at the Museum of Sonoma County in Santa Rosa. Details at museumsc.org. I'm your host and producer of this program, Michelle Marques. This show is a service of NorCal Public Media. Our president and CEO is Darren Lachelle.